The forest I paid for. The trouble began the day I put up my "No Trespassing" sign. I had just purchased a 50-acre patch of forest on the edge of town, tall pines, winding trails, a small creek running through the center. For me, it wasn't just land. It was peace. After 30 years of working in the city, I wanted somewhere quiet to live out the next chapter of my life. The papers were signed, the deed was recorded, and every square foot of that forest was legally mine. For the first few weeks, everything was perfect. I spent my mornings clearing brush, marking trails, and sitting by the water with a cup of coffee. The air smelled like pine needles and rain. The silence was something money couldn't buy, except I had bought it. But one afternoon, while I was putting up a small wooden gate at the entrance, a white SUV rolled up the dirt road. The driver was a woman in her late 50s with a sharp bob haircut, sunglasses, and a clipboard. She looked like she'd stepped out of a suburban HOA meeting, which, as I'd soon find out, was exactly what she'd come from. Her name was Karen, and she believed my land was hers to control. Before I could say a word, she started taking photos of the gate, my truck, and the trees around us. Then she waved her clipboard at me like it was a badge. I didn't even bother asking what she wanted. She made it clear fast enough. She claimed I was violating HOA landscaping standards, and that the community didn't allow private modifications to shared land. Except this wasn't shared land. It wasn't even inside her neighborhood. The nearest HOA house was a good half-mile away. At first, I laughed it off, assuming it was a misunderstanding. But within days, she was back, and this time she brought 2 men from her HOA board. They said I had encroached on community property and needed to remove the gate immediately. I showed them the deed, the county survey, even the plot map proving the forest was part of a separate parcel, one the developer had sold years before Cedar Pines HOA even existed. They didn't care. A week later, I received a letter taped to my gate. HOA violation notice, unauthorized structure on community land. It came with a fine of $2,500 and a threat of legal escalation. That's when the anger started to settle in. These people were used to pushing retirees around, scaring them into submission with rules and fees. But they'd picked the wrong person. I went to the county office myself. The clerk confirmed what I already knew. The forest was entirely mine, zoned as private land, and not included in any HOA boundaries. Karen and her board had no legal right to step foot on it. I left the office with certified copies of every document, ready to end this nonsense once and for all. But before I could even deliver them, I came home to find something far worse. My "No Trespassing" sign was gone. My gate, the one I'd built by hand, had been cut down. Deep tire tracks led into the forest where someone had driven straight through. I followed them for nearly 100 yards and found fresh paint marks on trees, bright orange spray with the letters HOA tagged across the trunk. That's when I realized it wasn't just about a gate anymore. Karen wanted to control the forest itself. She'd told her HOA members that I was squatting on community land and had convinced several of them that reclaiming it was their duty. They were planning something bigger. I could feel it in the air, the same kind of arrogance that comes from people who've never been told no. I took photos of everything, saved them in a folder, and decided that the next time Karen showed up, she wouldn't find an old man she could intimidate. She'd find the rightful owner, and I wasn't going anywhere. The boundary war. By the time I filed a formal trespass report with the sheriff's office, Karen had already begun her campaign. She posted on the local community Facebook page claiming that I was illegally occupying shared conservation land and blocking community access to nature trails. I didn't even know this group existed until a neighbor showed me the post, complete with pictures of my truck parked near the creek. Within days, people from the HOA started driving by, slowly rolling down the dirt road, pretending to take in the view while filming me. Some even parked outside my gate, asking if I was the squatter. It was surreal, a full-blown smear campaign over property they didn't even own. When I contacted the HOA office, they brushed me off. The woman on the phone said, "If you have a dispute, take it up with the board." But the board was the problem, led by Karen, who had turned this into a personal crusade. She'd convinced half the neighborhood that I was some sort of land thief. That's when I decided to take a different route, the legal one. My attorney, a calm, methodical man named Henry, was no stranger to HOA conflicts. He'd seen power-hungry board members before, but even he was surprised by how far this had gone. We went through the records again, and sure enough, there was a smoking gun. The original land deed from 40 years ago showed that the forested area was excluded from the Cedar Pines subdivision. It had been privately held land since before the HOA even existed. Henry sent a cease and desist letter to the board. It laid out everything clearly: the property lines, the recorded deeds, and the fact that any further interference would count as trespassing and harassment. For a moment, the forest was quiet again. Then came the drones. Yes, drones. Tiny buzzing machines that hovered just above the treetops, filming. I caught one on camera and traced its registration number back to a homeowner in Cedar Pines. Turns out, Karen had told residents they were documenting environmental violations. In reality, they were invading my privacy, filming my land without consent. That's when Henry filed a second complaint, this time with the Sheriff's Department and the County Zoning Board. And this time, the county responded. An inspector came out, reviewed my land, and confirmed what everyone except Karen already knew: I was the lawful owner. He even wrote an official report stating that the HOA's activities were unauthorized. I thought that would finally end it. But Karen wasn't done. She called a special HOA meeting, inviting residents to discuss next steps regarding the disputed forest. A friend of mine who lived nearby recorded the whole thing. There she was, standing in front of a projector, pointing at a map she'd edited herself, showing my property as part of the HOA's buffer zone. She told the crowd they were planning to petition the county to absorb the land into the HOA boundaries. That was the moment I knew this had become more than a nuisance. It was a battle over power. Henry helped me file an injunction to stop any further interference. We also added damages for vandalism and defamation. The sheriff served the HOA notice that same week. Word spread fast, and soon, the very people who had believed Karen's lies began to realize she had gone too far. I started receiving quiet apologies from neighbors, people who admitted they'd been misled. Some even said they'd voted against her in the last board election, but she'd refused to step down. By then, the story had caught the attention of a local newspaper. Their headline read, "Man battles HOA over forest they don't own." The comments online were brutal, not against me, but against Karen and her obsessive crusade. And yet, even with the law and public opinion turning against her, she didn't stop. She doubled down. One cold morning, I woke up to find survey stakes driven into my land, bright pink flags marking lines that didn't exist. Someone had come in the night and remapped the forest according to Karen's fantasy boundaries. That's when I realized this wasn't about rules, fines, or property lines anymore. This was personal, and the next move would end it for good. The fall of the Queen of Cedar Pines. The morning of the hearing was gray and silent, the kind of day that felt heavy before it even began. I stood outside the courthouse, papers in hand, knowing months of harassment had led to this moment. Karen arrived soon after, still clutching her clipboard, still wearing that air of superiority that had carried her through years of bullying her neighbors. Behind her trailed two nervous board members who clearly wished they were anywhere else. Inside, the courtroom filled with quiet whispers. Many of the faces I recognized from Cedar Pines, homeowners who had once believed her lies but had now seen enough to know the truth. Even the county attorney was there, after taking interest in how far the HOA had overstepped its legal boundaries. When the hearing began, my attorney, Henry, laid everything out like clockwork. The original property deeds, the county survey maps, the vandalism photos, the drone footage, every shred of evidence proving that my land had never, in any legal sense, belonged to the HOA. He explained how Karen had doctored boundary maps, filed false complaints, and instructed members to trespass. Then came the part that changed everything. Henry projected a video onto the courtroom screen, the recording from that HOA meeting where Karen had stood in front of her neighbors and declared her plan to reclaim the forest. Her own words condemned her. The judge leaned forward, listening closely, his face hardening with each sentence. When she finally took the stand, Karen tried to spin her story, claiming it was all a misunderstanding, that she believed the forest was unclaimed community land. But when the judge asked why she had ignored certified legal notices and vandalized private property, she had no answer. Her confidence cracked, and the courtroom grew painfully quiet. The verdict came swiftly. The judge ruled in my favor on every count. The HOA was ordered to pay damages for harassment, trespass, and defamation. Karen, personally, was fined and stripped of her position as HOA president. The county also issued a restraining order preventing her or any board member from stepping foot on my land again. When the gavel struck, I felt a strange calm wash over me. Months of frustration, sleepless nights, and anger, all finally justified. Word spread quickly through Cedar Pines. Within a week, the HOA board dissolved. Members resigned, homeowners demanded refunds, and Karen's once feared name became a joke whispered at backyard barbecues. Eventually, she put her house up for sale and left town quietly, without a single goodbye post to her followers. As for me, life returned to peace. The forest healed, the spray paint faded from the trees, the tire tracks disappeared under spring grass, and the sound of birds replaced the noise of drones. I rebuilt my gate, stronger this time, and left the same sign standing proud: no trespassing. Now, when I walk the trails in the early morning light, I think about how fragile peace can be, how quickly power can twist people when no one stands up to them. Karen thought rules made her powerful, but it was ownership, patience, and truth that won in the end. And somewhere between the tall pines and quiet creek, I finally understood something simple. Some people build fences to keep others out, others build them to protect what they love. I wasn't just defending land. I was defending peace. End of story.